Hello, and welcome to video number 31 in this series exposing the Jesuit Vatican shadow empire that rules the world through its United Nations One World Beast government. That's right, the beast government is here, has been since 1945. Before I explain the Jesuit Communism connection, it's important to remind you, the listener, of a few things about the Jesuit military order of Rome. Firstly, the Jesuits were founded in 1540 for the express purpose of restoring the temporal and spiritual power of the Roman Catholic Church over the whole world. Never forget this. People are oblivious to this goal of the Roman Catholic cult. Total world domination. That has been its express aim for 1600 years. Hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. This was the reason for the creation of the Council of Trent in 1545, so that a war plan called the Counter-Reformation might be drawn up and executed in order to destroy the Protestant Reformation begun earlier by Martin Luther and others by 1517. So this is the reason for the formation of the Jesuit order. It is to wage war against any force hindering the growth of the Roman Catholic cult and its domination over the whole world. Never forget this. This is central to understanding what is happening in the world today. Remember, the Roman Catholic cult is not a church. It's not Christian. It has nothing to do with the Bible. Nothing. It is a religio-political state. A monarchy with a king called the Pope, dominating the nations of the world today through its United Nations One World government. That's how it rules. It rules through the United Nations One World government. The end goal of the Jesuits has been to enslave mankind, both bodily and spiritually, wherever they have gone, using the Roman Catholic religion as a front for their wicked missionary activities. Missionaries of Satan. This they have managed to accomplish over 5 centuries of ceaseless toil. Incredible how diligent and persistent the Jesuits have been in achieving their goals over 500 years. The fourth oath of the Jesuits commands high Jesuits with jurisdiction to work tirelessly to bring all people into subjection to the Pope and to make war and destroy all heretics. And a heretic is defined as someone who does not adhere to Roman Catholic doctrine. That's right. Anyone who does not adhere or bow their knee to Roman Catholic doctrine and to the Pope is a heretic. The Roman Catholic cult is a fascist entity, coercing all men and women into worship of the Pope as God. That's fact. That is not my idea, but is the objective stated in numerous Roman Catholic documents issued over the last 1600 years. It's not some fanciful idea that I've come up with. This is documented. Communism is just another form of expression of Roman Catholic fascist religion. It's just another form of it. The aim is total control over people and the removal of all freedoms. I'm talking here about practical dystopian communism, which is what we have witnessed in the 20th century, not the fictional utopian ideology in the books, which can never be realized by corrupt men. Never in a million years. Remember, communism under tyrannical dictators is responsible for the deaths of more than 150 million souls, maybe more, in the last 100 years alone. Unbelievable. And people have just forgotten this history. This is a very serious subject of which few are aware or understand the dangers. Dangers that are imminent under the Jesuits' one world dictatorship now looming on the horizon. Very near. Communism has its roots in Nimrod's collectivist dictatorship, responsible for building the ancient Tower of Babel, Babylonian system. In fact, all successive empires have practiced a form of dictatorship under the guise of royalty. Royal inheritance, royal bloodlines. Communism is just another term used to describe tyrannical rule over the masses by an elite faction. Happens every time. It's never ever happened where a group of people have shared things in common unless it's been under God. There's always a chief calling the shots, a dictator, figurehead, and a network of minions who carry out orders for that chief using fear and terror in return for status and privileges. Always. Luciferian rulers going back to Nimrod have been practicing the same methodology of control no matter what label you stick on it. Doesn't matter. It's all the same. Firstly, communism has nothing to do with the Jews. That's very important to understand. Especially those Jews that still adhere to the Torah or the Old Testament of the Bible. Nothing to do with these people. Those who call themselves Jews but are not, as the Bible says, make up a wide but disparate number of groups who now come under the control of the Jesuit military order. It's all been accomplished. They're all controlled. It's all happened over the last 200 or 300 years. Zionists, Sabbateans, Talmudists, Freemasons, any label you want to put on these people, all receive orders from the Black Pope. Oh yes, they do. The Jews never had a central power base or organization for 2,000 years by which to execute power or control over anyone until 1948 and the establishment of the Papal State of Israel. Israel is run by papal Luciferian Jews, fake Jews, who are nothing more than administrators of the Papal Kingdom of Jerusalem. Oh yes, all controlled by the Pope. The Jews, or fake Jews, were and are used as a front by the Jesuits in order to give the appearance they are responsible for the world's ills. They are the scapegoat, taking the heat off Rome. The Roman Catholic cult have been using and blaming the Jews for 1,600 years. And that has not changed today. It's in history, people. They've been persecuted and hounded wherever they've gone for 1,600 years. It is not the Jews who are in control. Papal Jew managers for hire are the smokescreen for major businesses and banks worldwide behind which the Jesuits hide their operations. Really important to understand this. The Jews are just a front. Secondly, Marx and Engels never sat down and suddenly dreamt up the Communist Manifesto by themselves. No way. As smart as they were, they are not the authors. These men, as willing coadjutors, allowed their names to be used for payment as the authors of the communist ideology. It was either Jan Ruthan, 21st Jesuit Superior General himself, or Peter Becks, his successor, who coached Marx in the London Museum Library in the writing of this document in 1847, in order to erase any link to the Jesuits. I'm going to quote here from page 309 of Vatican Assassins, written by Eric J. Phelps, because I couldn't have expressed it better. He says, and I quote, "He, Marx, was privately tutored by Jesuits in the huge reading room of the British Museum while writing the Communist Manifesto based upon the 10 maxims or planks the order had perfected on its Paraguayan reductions between 1600 and 1750, and its Maryland reductions between 1650 and 1838. His writings were financed by the society's wealthy white Gentile cartel capitalists such as John D. Rockefeller Jr. and J.P. Morgan, also Shriner Freemasons, who, being in their doctrines and deeds, were in fact the revived old order of the crusading papal knights Templars. Marx, a racial Jew, was chosen for this task, for the order intended to blame, this is important, to blame all the brutal and savage evils of their absolutist communist inquisition on the Semitic Hebrew Jewish race. That is why Marx was chosen to write and be the author of this manifesto, so that Jews could be blamed as being the authors of communism. And they are not. It's important to note here that Marx was a Freemason and occultist, and you can see this in pictures of Marx with his hand in his jacket, one hand hidden in his jacket. This is the hidden hand sign of the Freemasons. It's all there in plain sight, folks. He was an occultist, an apostate Jew who openly stated his service to Satan. Oh, yes, he did. He was a Luciferian. Marx was intimately acquainted with Luciferians Giuseppe Mazzini, founder of the Mafia, high order Luciferian, and Albert Pike, high priest of modern Freemasonry. These were his friends. Think about it. This man was a wicked gun for hire used by the Jesuits to perpetuate and further accentuate the evil Jew myth, which would bear bloody fruit in Europe over the following century. It's also important to note that this manifesto was written to coincide with the wave of popular revolutionary uprisings that swept the nations of Europe starting, yes, you guessed it, in 1848, the year immediately after it was published. Coincidence? No. I say no way. Unbelievable convergence of this document being published and a wave of revolutionary uprisings sweeping across Europe the next year. No coincidence. You'll have to make up your own mind. As for me, It is clear after extensive study that the Jesuits are the masters of revolution, which always precedes a communist regime is revolution, and were responsible for all these uprisings using their Masonic foot soldiers and agents as agitators. That is how it's done, people. Agitating against the ruling authority, bringing in revolution, bloody revolution, followed by a communist regime, brutally oppressing the people. It's happened again and again and again, and still people cannot see the pattern and who's behind it. Communism, or collectivization as a pure ideology, is a utopian fiction that can never be realized. Never. The roots of this concept are found in Aristotle's natural law. Check it out. Which was rediscovered and then practiced in the pagan, priestly, monastic religious orders developed by Roman Catholicism. The Benedictines, founded in 529 AD, are the first to implement monasticism or communism, an early form of communism, and eventually their monasteries assert their influence over every region in Europe as community centers controlling education and the spiritual and civic life of the population. It's a form of communism. These pagan priests practiced celibacy, and it's not surprising that homosexuality and sexual depravity were rampant and practiced covertly. All part and parcel of the debauchery of communist philosophy or belief and practice. As the medieval period progresses, the Roman Catholic cult attempts to extend its temporal and spiritual power over all peoples by creating monastic and military orders to enforce Catholic doctrine on the peoples. This is really important to understand. You can read it in history, people. The Roman Catholic cult is not a church, but a criminal organization busy deceiving and enslaving the whole world. Charlemagne, or Charles I of France, becomes the first wielding sword of the church in 800 AD, enforcing Catholic religion over the Frankish, Lombard, and Roman peoples. In 1099 AD, the Papal Order of the Sovereign Knights of Malta, or ESMOM, are founded, with the Knights Hospitaller or Templar Crusaders following in 1119 AD, shortly after. These are military orders that control the world's banking, intelligence, military, and media industries worldwide for the Jesuits today. You can see it in the pictures, folks. Go online and look at the pictures of all the Knights of Malta gathered together, or the Knights Templar gathered together. What do you think these people are doing? Having tea parties? Much later, in 1882, the Knights of Columbus would be established in the USA to control education, health, and the insurance and charity industries. That's right. The Roman Catholic Church controls all international charities. That money goes right into their pockets. Don't give them a cent. In 1209 and 1216, the Franciscans and then the Dominican orders are set up by Pope Innocent III and would take charge of the most diabolical persecution of humans ever seen in world history, the Inquisition, which still carries on today in the form of revolutions, genocides, and wars against peaceful nations and people groups not subservient to Rome. They've never stopped. People say the Inquisition stopped 500 years ago. No, it didn't. The Inquisition's been going for nearly 1,000 years. It just takes different shapes and forms as the Roman Catholic Church uses it to force people into what it wants people to be and do. Finally, in 1540, the Jesuit military order, the most powerful and nefarious Catholic order ever established, begins its counter-Reformation war against Protestant Christianity, which continues unabated today. Make no mistake about it. They are still waging war against Christianity in any shape or form in order to exterminate it from the face of the earth. Communism is pure distilled monastic collectivism, enslaving the people in a system of compliance, fear, and terror. The Jesuits developed this form of communism in all its brutal practicality by enslaving the Guarani Indians of Paraguay, laboring them on large communal settlements and strictly monitoring their lives. They're under surveillance all the time. At the height of the enslavement, more than 250,000 natives were manufacturing products or growing crops for export and sale into European and world markets, transported by the Jesuit fleet of black ships. Who's the author of slavery and slave labor? The Jesuits, the Luciferian Jesuits. From 1606 until their expulsion from South American territories in 1773, the Jesuits became fabulously wealthy using slave labor. And that wealth they have used to wage war all over the world. That's right, the Jesuits have used their wealth to wage war against all the peoples of the world in order to bring them into subjection to Rome. Still happening today. Hasn't stopped. Whole populations of Indians, native Indians, were indoctrinated into yet another form of pagan religion in the guise of Christianity and educated in Jesuitical revolutionary ideology. There were 7 major communes in Paraguay, a number of them in Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia, although the Jesuits established missions in every region of South America by 1691. They were busy, enslaving and indoctrinating the natives. Today, the whole continent of South America remains predominantly Roman Catholic, and most of the countries have been, or are, hotbeds of revolution, criminal gang violence, drug production and trafficking, brutal anarchy, and every form of corruption, every form of wickedness. Roman Catholic dictatorships and systems of communist control are the standard for South American Catholic peoples. Horrible and sad. Notable applications of Jesuitical communism in the 20th century are China, Russia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Cuba, East Germany, North Korea, Myanmar, and a host of East European, African, and South American countries. The result? For the poor victims caught in the web of terror, brutal living conditions, loss of basic freedoms, extreme poverty, the disappearance and murder of hundreds of millions of innocent victims, or anyone who dared to protest. Imprisonment, torture, and lives lived in constant terror. Constant terror. I can't imagine it. The horror of communism. This is what is coming in the near future to all peoples of the world. Most are already living under oppressive political regimes loyal to the Jesuits of Rome, and the others who believe they are living in democratic systems are in fact living under soft communist governments. As I've stated in other videos, democracy doesn't exist anywhere because all elections are fraudulent, a hoax perpetuated to deceive people into believing they are free and have a choice. Let me repeat, they, you, or I do not have a political voice or choice. We are so close to a one-world blanket communist system. People have no idea. The Jesuits have taken control of human life everywhere in order to implement new cultural modes which they have stated are for the common good. For the common good. These 5 areas of control are pastoral, ecclesiastical, civic, social, and cultural. And you can see there the Jesuits control over all these areas everywhere today. People, let me remind you, there is only one organization on the face of the earth with the longevity and size to implement systems of world control. It takes a long time for systems of control to be set up because, of course, people who are awake will resist control and enslavement, and they did many times in the past. This is the result of the wars. This was the reason for the bloody 30 Years' War between 1618 and 1648, when Protestant peoples resisted Roman Catholic domination. Sadly, as public knowledge about the Jesuit machinations and threat to liberty has waned over the last 100 years, the Jesuits have been hard at work setting up their one-world communist government. It's taken them 350 years to do it, essentially, but it's here now and will appear in full power when the digital currency becomes the standard. When all money becomes e-currency, that's it. Everyone will be locked into a slave system of control. All governments cooperate with Rome. The one world religion is already here. People are just not paying attention to the evil that is rising up around them. They see it in the news, but they believe falsely that all will be well, that governments will take care of them. Are you kidding? They will not. That's not what they're there for. Exactly what the Bible prophesied would happen 2,000 years ago is taking place right now. Communism is the perfect system for world enslavement, and it is being implemented rapidly everywhere. To reiterate, communism was and is not a Jewish invention. The proof so often cited is that of Leonid Trotsky, along with 200 Bolsheviks being shipped secretly from New York, joining Lenin and others in Zurich. These then traveled secretly by train through Germany to Petrograd, and this is touted as the prime example of Jewish communist involvement, somehow proving Jews were the ringleaders. Well, no, they weren't. Lenin and his mob were Masonic, Luciferian criminals before they were anything else. Jewishness had nothing to do with the Russian Revolution. Joseph Stalin also was not a Jew, but a Roman Catholic and a Jesuit. That's right. He graduated from Tbilisi Monastery as a Jesuit. If these men were Jews, then why did they immediately start exterminating Russia's Jewish and Orthodox Christian population, eventually murdering as many as 60 million people? Why would Jews do that to their own kind? That doesn't make sense. Let's use some common sense here. It's the Luciferian Catholics, Jesuits, and Freemasons who hate Jews and persecute them. Communism has its origins 100% in the Roman Catholic cult and was fine-tuned as an ideology by the Jesuit military order in the 19th century. The documentation is there to prove it for anyone wanting the truth. The Jesuits are indeed the ghost writers of the Communist Manifesto, as well as the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, Mein Kampf, and a host of other documents for the purpose of attribution to Jewish writers. All these publications encapsulate the Jesuit mind. the Jesuit mind, laying out the strategies for the deception and enslavement of mankind. As I do in all my videos, I urge you, the listener, if you're not a Christian and are unaware of biblical prophecy, to look carefully at world events and study the signs of the times. What I'm telling you is true. It's taken me some time to put all this together for your benefit. There is no financial reward in this for me. Everything I do is paid for out of whatever meager resources I have. All I get is the joy of knowing that I help someone wake up, and that's enough for me. I do this because I fear God and care enough to warn people, total strangers, about the dangers that are headed our way soon. I'm in this just like you are. I'm human. We're all in this together. I'm warning you. I'm taking the time to do this, not for myself, for you, the listener. There is only one thing any person can do when faced with this knowledge about the Jesuits, the soon-to-come beast system, and that is to get right with God. Get your spiritual house in order. After death and after Jesus Christ's return, it will be too late. There are no second chances for any human soul. Only God's wrath and final judgment. Do not be deceived into thinking life is meant to be a joyride and then nothing. Life is a series of tests, a preparation for eternity. In choosing to do good by serving God, not an opportunity to live wickedly and indulge every selfish pleasure of the flesh. That's not why we're here, folks. Jesus Christ is God and is the one and only way to be saved from eternal damnation. Jesus said in John chapter 14, verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. Better pay attention, people. God means what he says. All those who reject God's offer of mercy will perish in their sins forever. Now is the day of salvation. Now is the appointed time. There may not be a tomorrow for you. Thank you for listening. And I pray that God will open your eyes to the truth of this evil world system ruled by the synagogue of Satan, the Jesuits of Rome. Please share this information, if you can do so, that others may also hear and wake up to this dark reality. I hope to see you in the next video.